Time now for me to stop talking and introduce our first panel. So I'm going to do very brief introductions to all of our speakers and panellists today because all the information's on the website. Use the QR code or go to westernsydney.org.au, then click on Event Resources and then Speakers. So if I could ask our panellists to make their way up to the stage as I'm doing this brief introduction, that would be terrific. Our first panel is titled Beyond Books, Developing the Skills, Knowledge and Leadership of Greater Western Sydney's Gen Next. And our panellists are Kerry Penton, Chief Delivery Officer from TAFE New South Wales, Andrew Phong, Andrew's Community Advisor at the Academy, Western Sydney University, John Vassallo, Chief Executive Officer, Celestino and Sydney Science Park, Greg Whitby AM, Greg's the Executive Director, Catholic Education for the Diocese of Parramatta, and our moderator is Dr. Linda O'Brien AM, Principal, School Leadership and High Performance, Department of Education. Please make them welcome.
Thank you very much indeed, and good morning. It's wonderful to be here today and to uncover not just the knowledge that our guests have here, our panellists have here today about the future of education, but also to be in Western Sydney. What a treasure chest it is. We're going to be talking about how to connect our students to the future. What do we do in our schools to make sure that people are job ready? What do we do about this question of diversity? What do we do about the question of equity in our schools? We've got enormous plans to build the schools for the population explosion that's happening and still continues. But what are we going to do when we talk about the curriculum? What's it going to look like? I have it's a great pleasure. I've met our panellists over the telephone and had some really interesting conversations about their position on these questions. And I guess my job today is just to ask some questions. So I'm going to open it up. First of all, I'm going to let them tell you a little bit about themselves, and then we're going to start asking a few questions. So I might start with you, Greg. If you'd like to introduce yourself.
Greg Whitby. I've been a professional educator, I suppose, all my life. I've worked in the government sector and the non-government sector, and worked in as Executive Director in a couple of jurisdictions for the last 20 years, and I spent 10 years also working at the University of Western Sydney and the Graduate School of Business.
Okay, and Kerry, how are you, Kerry?
Thank you very much for the welcome. So I have had the great opportunity in my career to work in vocational education training, and particularly for TAFE New South Wales, across New South Wales in various positions, and absolutely passionate about what skills can bring to the economy, but how we frame those skills from a partnership model perspective to provide opportunities from a positive base rather than from a deficit model. So for me, today's discussion is very, very important, and from vocational education and training's perspective, we've got that unique position in the market, which is fantastic.
Fantastic. And John? John had a man full of opportunities.
Thank you. Yes, John Vassallo, CEO of Celestino. My background is I grew up in Western Sydney on a farm. Had a chance experience with a law firm for a work experience program. That set me on my career path to become a lawyer. Opened up my own law firm in Blacktown through the late 90s, and then through the noughties there, I started to build up a property development business for the Beata family, which is today known as Celestino. And I guess through my role as a lawyer and seeing the trends in Western Sydney, I saw the importance of education and the impact that could have on individuals, but also the socio-economics of entire areas. And so with Sydney Science Park, we've really designed that around education and the impact education could have on not only Sydney Science Park, but the broader Western Sydney area.
And Andrew, a young man who seized every opportunity.
Thanks, Linda. So Andrew Phong, my name is. Phong first in family to study at university. I'm very lucky to be here today, and very lucky to have my mother here today as well. So I love you, Mum. Thanks for coming. Thank you. I'm a proud Parramatta boy. Parramatta, I'm very proud to have studied there. I'm a high school there. Parramatta and Bankstown, arguably the two best places for fur outside of Vietnam itself. So I'm happy to be here, and Linda, I'm ready to talk with the panelists about education.
Wonderful, wonderful. Right, so I'm going to open up first of all with our question about connecting what we're doing in education to the future. I mean, oftentimes education's retrospective. We are reactive rather than proactive. So what is it that we're going to start thinking about and start doing to connect to these ideas, what sort of curriculum are we going to look at? Who'd like to start? Greg?
I'm not sure I'd frame it that way. I understand what you're saying, but the simple issue is for us, we need to teach young people how to think. They have to learn how to do the future. We spend too much time talking about what the future could look like. I mean, I rather like the future. I intend to spend a lot of my life there, but I want to make sure that we equip young people to be able to learn how to live and contribute into that future. That requires us then, I think, to really challenge all the existing structures and processes we have in place, because they're an artefact of a world that's gone by. The industrial model of schooling has had its go. I don't think it's fit for purpose in a digital world. So the answer to the curriculum is that we don't need a curriculum, we need curriculums. We need a whole range of learning frameworks and opportunities for young people to live and learn and to be able to continue to learn.
I think that's really heartening to hear you say that. When you're talking about a digital future and the fact that, and we're talking here about beyond books, we're talking about the fact that if students can access knowledge in many different places, then how do schools go beyond their custodial nature, their custodial role, because we have to send them somewhere during the day. So what are we going to do with them when they get there?
Well, I think we face the reality that schools no longer hold the mortgage on knowledge and how you acquire that knowledge, and it's a mindset that we need to shape. So we've got to open up the world, open up the structures and open up the opportunities for people to work together and access information when they need it, where they need it, how they need it and what time they need it.
Okay, and Kerry, in terms of opportunities for students in terms of qualifications and acquiring the necessary qualifications for those jobs of the future, what opportunities are there and what changes are coming or have already started?
I think for me is the whole language base that we use about education and training, and even the word continuum. I don't believe that the models for both education, training and higher education will fit well around a frame of continuing, going from end to end. Personally, I believe it's about creating a microcosm for education, of which training and skills are a part, the fundamentals of education are a part, and then developing the thinking, as Greg was saying, how we can put that microcosm together more collaboratively to provide a range of pathways and opportunities for our students is something that's going to be really important for us moving forward, because it isn't a stepped process. For a young person today, the breadth of opportunities and the way that they will navigate both their educational experience and their learning experience as well as their work experience can be built in a whole range of different ways, and it is about going from school to TAFE, school from university, university to TAFE, TAFE to work, work to university, and really opening the minds of everyone and how those pathways can be developed. But you've got to be able to then bring together all of the areas of education, both the school education sector, both public and private, the TAFE sector, the vet sector, the employers that are in there that are going to be receiving these skills into the future and need this new workforce, whatever that looks like, and higher education. And bring it together much earlier from a learning perspective. I think we often talk about the career conversation in high school. I personally believe those conversations and that broad thinking needs to develop with parents and young people as early as year 6, and broadening the horizons and the aspirations of young people. So it's how you can collectively bring that together into different models.
And the problem too, I think, is the credentialing in terms of the power structures that exist, because what you're suggesting is sort of broadening and undoing some of those power structures.
In some ways, yes, because we've got school curriculum, we've got the vet sector with our qualifications framework, and then we've got the higher education sector. And while some of them all have their advantages, some have their challenges. But in the vet sector, I don't think it's well enough understood how you can sit beside a full qualifications, skill sets and skill stacking, both in those formative foundational areas where people are choosing their first careers, where those generic and soft skills can take them and how you can move that across a range of different fields, and then build on that, particularly from a higher technological base, but also looking at a range of learning frameworks that bring the education to the person. So we're doing a lot in the AR space, the VR space, so that we can get skills developed more quickly, more efficiently, but to give a broader outcome. So it's those different educational models that can sit around the framework, but certainly I think there is a broader discussion to have around the framework.
And so, Greg, what about the partnership then with schools, given that sort of that multi-pathway?
It's a collaborative world. You cannot do this by yourself anymore. We know that from all the successful businesses. So I won't pick up a point Kerry made. The idea that you can own the credential and live in a fool's paradise that the HSC is a gold standard of education in the Western world is ridiculous in today's world. The default position will be to the quality end of the market, and we're already seeing that with micro-credentialing on the rise, very powerful, working with organisations in collaboration to give you the experience, and you can put together a learning framework yourself. When you can go and do Harvard Ed, machine-to-machine learning, which will be equivalent to a first-year university course, and you can do it online, you can do it where you want to, and it's free, and you can add that to a whole range of qualifications that you might be able to get centrally or globally. You start to reshape opportunities, and it's not a linear process. It's a collaboration that we need all to work together and get away from this fact that there is one way and one size to fit all. It's killing schooling. It's killing the future of young people in our schools to treat them the way we treat them.
Yeah. And you led in then to collaboration, not only across education sectors, but also with industry partnerships and so forth for opportunities for pathways. John, I bring you in there because in our conversation over the phone, you talked a lot about experiences that you'd had in America as well, and also the opportunities that are there in Science Park with the with schools.
Yes, thanks, Linda. I guess building on what Greg spoke about, the old industrial model, and what Kerry spoke about as well, is I think fundamentally, if you look at the disruption that's happening around the world, the disruption normally happens where someone turns an incumbent business model on its head and focuses on the customer. And I think when you look at the education system, I mean, you've got the development of the individual as a balanced person, is fundamental, but I don't think there's enough focus on the customer, and I think to a certain extent the education system doesn't even know who the customer is, and there's not many businesses that are going to be successful if they don't know who their customer is. And to me, the customer is, I don't want to be a bit controversial here, but the student is not the customer. The family who sends a student to the school is not the customer. The student, to me, in a blunt fashion, is the product. And it's a product of a system that comes through the system, and at the end of the system, the customer is the employers who are going to employ that person. And I don't think there's enough focus on what the customer wants. I don't think the education system spends enough time interacting with the customer. I know Greg is doing that, and we're doing that as far as trying to bring these parties together. But if you look at the world and companies like Amazon, where it goes around, gets 50 cities to compete against each other to go and put its new second head office, one of the big things they're looking at is, the quality of the employment pool and the education systems and the ability for that place to provide it with quality employees. I don't think Western Sydney and Sydney is looking at itself that way. And we need a system that is producing a massive pool of innovative, capable humans that are very adaptable. And so that the customer, the businesses that want to locate maybe in Singapore or Shanghai or Sydney, when they compare areas, they think there's no other place like Western Sydney, because it's got the new airport coming, because it's got the multicultural society, because it's got the natural environment. But hopefully one day it'll be because it's got the best, most diverse, dynamic young work pool coming through because of these schools that have been collaborating with industry and listening and bringing these kids through. And so one of the examples I saw in the US was really successful research parks that if a business wanted to locate in the States, they've got plenty of options. So they need to compete to attract these large companies to come to them. Like Western Sydney is now going around the world trying to get companies to come to the Metropolis and to Western Sydney. And so they ask the companies, what do they want? And when I say they, it's the collaboration of the universities, the schools, the local authorities, and they work out, okay, if we're going to locate our pharma, manufacturing plant there, or our research labs here, or whatever it is they're doing, we're going to need these skills. And the universities and the schools and the local businesses work together to provide them with a pool to satisfy their needs in that area and to make them the standout option in terms of that offering. And I don't think I'm not seeing that on a broad scale yet. I think that's the direction we need to
I think
go.
probably we're talking about it. I know at Western Sydney University we're talking about it certainly, particularly with the Hawkesbury campus and building the partnerships there with the industries, also with the 21st century curriculum. I'm going to bring Andrew in. Andrew, as a member, an ambassador for the Academy, what are you talking to the young people about in terms of their future?
Well, I think education, it's a very tricky topic, and I think that's why we're here today. Whether or not we're actually ready for the future, Linda, I think both yes and no. I think with my opportunities that I've been afforded through the university, there's a lot of industry engagement. We see, I'll go as far as saying that Western Sydney University is leading the charge in terms of preparing for future employability. We see the blended learning spaces at One Parramatta Square, and then now we see also Liverpool in the CBD Health District there. And in 2022, we'll see here right in Bankstown a very multi-storey, state-of-the-art educational facility. I tell the students now that build skills in emotional intelligence, cultural intelligence, to supplement that IQ that you're clearly capable of enhancing. University institutions now, in particular, they provide a place for learning, but also they constantly need to upskill and consult industry. And they can't work in isolation, as my fellow panelists have said. There needs to be involvement from state and federal governments in some form of some reform, basically, to ensure the basic education that they're providing is developing the skills that will enable their students to really excel in the future instead of just making up the numbers and being a statistic at the end of the day. We see, I tell my fellow peers and the people at the Academy, if anyone doesn't know, is Western Sydney University's premier student program for high achievers. And there's no better program in the area, I believe. I've been great to experience stuff through the Go West mentoring program with News Corp. getting the great CB as one of my mentors, Lucy Turnbull. I've been overseas 7 different times telling the students that, mate, you can do it. I haven't always been a straight A student. I wasn't in the academy initially, but it was there and I was able to get it. So with hard work and aspirations, and we hear a lot of aspiration talk in politics these days, but it is well and alive. And I think, honestly, you can just achieve whatever you want to achieve, with Western Sydney in particular. I think Western Sydney, talking to a lot of my peers over other institutions, the university really stands out that in the people-to-people connections that it really fosters. The lecturers, for people like Linda from the board, they really genuinely invest their interest in student development, and I think that's one of the highlights. And I tell the students at the academy, reach out, form relationships, and really grab the opportunity by the head. Yeah.
Thank you, Andrew. I have a couple of questions. Kerry, we have a question for you from the floor. What's new in TAFE? What are the new demands being placed on the TAFE system from both students, employers, government, or the community?
That's everyone, I think.
That seems to be everybody.
It is. From that perspective, a lot of people would know that we've been through quite a bit of change in TAFE New South Wales, and really what it's been about is centring around how we can operate as one organisation to respond to the needs of New South Wales, whether it's here in Western Sydney and other areas. So we were 11 registered training organisations, and we've now come together as one. And that's something that I'm very proud that we've made a decision to do with the support of government, because what it really is doing is taking those 11, joining the powerhouse of one, so that we're actually stopping internal competition. Because competition, by its nature, provides a couple of things. It provides incentive and innovation, and that's absolutely what's been going on in our organisation for the last 15 years. But as we've shifted around where we need to be as a business and as an organisation and as a public provider, is to rise above that so that we can collaborate together to do more as one than we could have ever done as 11 individuals. So that's really important from that perspective. Our core value is customer first. So when we're talking about where our focus is, it's absolutely looking at the customer journey. So that's what our students are telling us. We want to be able to learn when, where and how we want to, and far more innovatively than we've ever done before. So we're looking both at our infrastructure, similarly to education, and how we can provide that technology. As part of the new model, we have established and reformed our online business to TAFE Digital, which is not only providing and developing innovative ways of learning more flexibly to deliver that to employers, but it's also then providing the opportunities for students to be far more mobile in their learning experience. Mm-hmm. Because it is that balance between those coming into TAFE on their very early stages of their career and skills and personal development, to those that are in the workforce who are looking to adapt their skills and build their skills over time. So we do straddle this very broad point. And then, so that's from a student perspective. So when I talk about augmented reality, virtual reality learning in real time, we're investing quite a bit in that space, and where people and our students are starting to see that. We're rebuilding all of our systems to underpin that, to ensure that the customer journey and the customer experience is something that our students expect. And then also obviously responding to government policy, and certainly from a New South Wales government perspective. And you've heard it a little bit this morning around this expectation that agencies will come together and collaborate to provide a seamless, real-time benefit for the communities of which they serve. So really pushing government departments to work together collaboratively for the greater good, and I think that we need to explore that then across the broader vet sector and the skills sector and the education sector. There will always be government policy which will lever and pull levers to drive different parts of the economy, but in my experience, it's the leaders that you put in that who rise above that, who work with the policy, understand what it means, but come together above that across education, across TAFE, across universities, to actually use all of what they have to the benefit of the communities and the employers that we serve, and that's where you get the best outcome for communities, and that's where you get the best outcome for individual enterprises or broader business sectors who need us to be looking over the horizon, not just at the here and now. So that's what we're all about from a Take New South Wales perspective.
Thank you. We're inviting any questions from the floor too. There are people spotting, so if you've got a question, there's a question here. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your insights. And my name's Billy. I'm from Western Sydney Community Forum. And I just wanted to touch on that concept of who the customer is. And John, I love a bit of controversy. So I note that you sort of said the customer is the employer at the end of the day. So how are we using the education system to shape the future for our employees? Now, I would say that the employer is one of the customers into the future, and I would also argue that there's multiple customers. The customer might be a parent or a child or a mother or a son or a daughter. So I guess, or the community or our land at large. So I guess in that context, what I'm interested in is how the education system, as well as developing the skills of our future generation for the employer as a customer, how does our education system build good citizens, strong communities, and not only look at it as from an economic lens, but also from a social and environmental lens as well.
I'll reply first. I think it's making sure that the school doesn't sit in a silo and not be part of the community. I think the best way to create good citizens is to ensure that the school is part of the community, and it needs to be done in a physical sense. I mean, that example Chris uses of the school being across the road from the kids' correctional centre and then a jail. I guess what I'm saying is the more schools can be interwoven into the community generally and actually see businesses in operation and be exposed to industry and exposed to career paths, to understand how say with Science Park, we're doing a lot already in terms of water quality, in terms of the environment, so that we can measure our footprint on the environment over time, and the students within our community will understand their impacts on the environment, and hopefully take those learnings into their lives going forward. So I think it's just tearing down these walls beyond books, probably beyond walls, and getting kids to interact with. I know there's kids that go out to old people's homes, so they see, old people, that benefits the older generation, but it also benefits the kids. But I think that same interaction with working opportunities, with community groups, I think it needs to be, holistic. And look, we sponsored the Australian Ballet coming to Western Sydney. We sponsored the Joan at Penrith. We don't believe just in economics. You have to be the best. Employees are going to be very, rounded, and holistic individuals who look at the whole, the whole situation, not just where I'm going to get the best salary. So I think it is important, but I think it actually people play down or don't really take into regard the physical environment and that exposure kids get to different situations and how that can impact their life and put them on a journey. I think that's really important.
I think we've got to be really honest about this and face the fact that the model we have doesn't work at the moment. If you look at the major policy levers to fix education and respond to the discussion we're having here, it's all about improvement. Like, improving what? I mean, why improve a system that doesn't work? There's only a limit that you can get to. What we need to do is transform. We need to change. We need a whole new business model. And that business model has a range of core principles, and it's about collaboration, it's about cooperation, it's about learning and thinking, not measuring and not weighing. We're in Parramatta, we're in a partnership with Celestino as we're rethinking what schooling can be into a science park. We've never built a school in a science park, but we're going to have a red hot go at it. But it's challenging everything we understand about the learning process. When we meet with politicians, we find that they're reticent because the focus needs to be on whether we have a high school student or not, whether we do net plan or not, or whatever. All those are artefacts of a structure that's not delivering on what we want. We've never been more concerned about schooling and its future in this country as we are at the moment, because we keep talking about the need to improve. How about we put the energies into transforming? And that's why this forum and forums like it are so critical for us, because it gives us the opportunity to open it out and say everybody's in this together. It's not, nobody has a mortgage on this. And universities, schools are changing rapidly. We announced 2 years ago our schooling process. We now enrol from age 3 through to post. We provide a whole range of different opportunities, and not us providing them, negotiating with a range of providers so that you can do and blend and credential so that you can continue to learn and relearn. And that's what the game's about.
I'd just like to step in here. I stepped down as principal at Granville Boys High School in February this year, and we had huge issues with arising from equity and being a marginalised school, and the students' sense of who they were and their sense of belonging and their sense of identity, and very much a sense of I'm a Granville boy. And our challenge as educators was to make sure that being a Granville boy meant that you were a very successful individual, and one of the ways in which we did that was through collaboration, cooperation with a range of community organisations and businesses, so that the curriculum was very much about boys having opportunities to work out problems with community partners. They did extraordinary things at the observatory, at the university, at the Museum of Applied Arts and Sciences, at cultural institutions, through ICE, at Westwards. They went on writing excursions, they went everywhere. And it was about you and your identity as a Granville boy. My big concern is, and particularly when we're talking about that Christopher's iron fence, what is it? Colorbond fence. The Colorbond fence is about, opening up the lid on the richness this side of the Colorbond fence. And we need to do that by supporting students to be assertive about who they are. And we can do that through these sorts of collaborations and these innovative approaches. What I wanted to ask about was also about what the inhibitors are. I think Greg's articulated them very strongly about transformative models and remodelling and old models and so forth. I think, I've got my opinions about what the inhibitors are, but I'm going to ask and throw it over to you about what's inhibiting these changes.
I would extend what's already been said, and particularly from Billy's perspective and your question. It's, and what Greg's been saying, it's about, I think it's a broader conversation from a societal perspective, where from an education lens, it's the ATAR or it's university or it's nothing. And your comment about what you were trying to create in your school, it's about what the individual's journey is, and as a society that we genuinely value what each individual's journey is, that it's not an either or, and we continue to have this either or deficit model conversation. So whether it's in the really sort of hard skills, whether it's in the arts, whether it's in the languages, whether it's in the workplace or in the education sector, if we as parents and we as a society can't open our minds to value everybody's journey, no matter what it is, from a positive base, we will continue to stay in this lockstep of curriculum and not be building human beings who are adaptable, who are resilient, and who have aspiration. And it is what their aspiration is. I think the other part of it is, and I would put the challenge out, it is about the workplaces, that we create as well. And from an employer's perspective, creating, and we have it, we've got 17,000 staff across the state and TAFE New South Wales. Who are we going to be as an employer? What sort of workplace are we going to create that will attract? So employers have to have a value proposition as well. And that's a really important part of that continuum. So for me, it is really around sort of opening it right up.
And can I add to this? It's easy to blame people. I don't want you to take what I said about politicians as blame. Everybody shares in this responsibility. When you embark on a change, people naturally get reticent about it. We've got some schools, got open learning places, kids not in cohort progression, all those sorts of things, and parents come along and think it's the craziest thing they see, and they just want the school like they have it. So we've got to work with the schools, we've got to work with the communities, but we have to just be very clear on something. If you take the high school certificate, for example, it was designed in the 1950s. It's still going in 2019. They're going to sit for we'll have 60,000 kids sitting for a pen and paper test over a period of 3 weeks in October and November with all the hoo-ha going about stress and well-being, etc., when we can tell you who's going to be the top 10 schools and with the HSC already. So something is wrong. So that's going to take a dialogue, it's going to take an intelligent dialogue, and it's going to take the courage to invest in innovation and support the people who do it. And they're the teachers in our schools, the TAFE teachers, our teachers, in all the schools. They're the ones that do the work. They're the ones that have the answer, and we've got to back them collaboratively, and it means it's parents, politicians, and the profession working on this solid base, knowing that we have to change, we have to innovate, and we have to transform.
Thank you. Do we have a question at the back? Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
Is this on? Yeah. I'm Reverend Bill Cruz, and I've got to say I was starting to fall asleep because I've been hearing a lot of this for years and years and years and years until Greg, I think it was, opened it up. I used to think schools could fix kids up. I used to think kids could come into schools and all of that. And I was at a conference the other day where the guy said, it all has to be done within the school. We don't want anybody outside the school to come in and fix it up. And that is just not true. I've found really problem kids who are really smart, the schools squeeze them out. Schools actually squeeze out kids. And until the system realises that and opens it up, like Greg is saying, for people, so that some kids in the years, they need some sort of, they used to drive in the truck with the guy who used to teach him things along the way. Until we free the system up, we're just trapped. We're trapped in a system. Like, we get kids, I've been working with kids, as I said, for 30 years, and I see how the system squeezes them out, and I see how bright so many of them are. And I see so many schools only interested in the brightest and the best and all of that, and I agree with all of that. But schools then kick out the kids who aren't the brightest and the best, who have the potential to be, because they're deemed to be too hard to work with. Either they're too hard to work with, or their parents are too hard to work with, so we don't want anything to do with them. And I find that really sad, and the more we can put a bomb up the whole of the education system and get it for the future, for the future where we need innovative kids. A lot of the entrepreneurs I meet never finished school, never went to university, but they learned it as they went along. I'm not decrying the system, I'm just saying that outside of the system we need a new way to deal with kids for the future where there's so much individuality in it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, what you've just been talking about are those structural inhibitors, and this is the sort of thing that we're talking about. But there are many different institutions within society that are also talking about change. The Business Council, industry, students are coming out with the wrong skills. The other issues that we face down the track are to do with particularly with equity. If jobs are disappearing, what are we educating children for? We've got to make sure that we think about these sorts of things. I'm not sure that a bomb under everything would be the answer.
That I agree wholeheartedly. You'd be surprised with that last speaker. But you think about this. In Australia and in New South Wales, it's compulsory to attend school. You can go to jail if you don't send your child to school. Learning's optional. Why don't we turn it on its head so learning's mandatory and attendance is optional? If you look to simple stats, if you look at attendance rates in schools across Australia, in some places they're down to 60% on a daily basis. What are those young people telling us? So we need to listen to those voices.
Indeed. And this leads into our next question. It's about what support exists for teachers, either during their teacher training or through professional learning, to equip them to be innovative educators in changing educational landscapes. Anybody with teacher training expertise? I think a lot of that training happens once you get into the school. Okay. Coming to you, sir. Will you let that one through? Sir.
Hi, good afternoon, Errol. Good morning, everybody. My name is Mark. My question, with great deference and respect to our panel, I'm really interested in a question to Andrew. Andrew, as the most recent graduate of school in Western Sydney and continuing to study in your current capacity, and congratulations on the work that you were doing, I'm really interested in your recent experience of school, in terms of how when you finished, what it meant for you, and what do you think are the sort of things that you think other young people in Western Sydney are looking for in the school of the future?
Thank you for that question. I think, honestly, higher education, that's all I can speak of. I can only speak of higher education. I'm no expert on primary and high school. I wasn't very much a student back then. But higher education, it's increasingly becoming a prerequisite for access to and successful participation in the labour force, labour market. And that means, as my fellow panellists have said, strong engagement with the community. And at Western Sydney University as a student, I've been very engaged with community. I've just most recently came back from an internship with Austrade in Ho Chi Minh City. There's EY, PwC, Deloitte, and NAB and so forth coming onto campus providing workshops, allowing that first-hand experience for students, developing those soft skills. The dialogue's a very strong champion of education, and they've proven that today. They've given access to the academy students, and I know they're in the audience here, and they're great ambassadors for education. They've provided, from my experience in particular, it's been so special, knowing that, being first in family, and it's a great news story over the last decade or so. Everyone's speaking about, people that are not traditionally fitting the mould of people that go to university. And I think what Catherine spoke about earlier, 54,000, I think it is, of the region now having undergraduate degrees. That's a massive achievement. And I think that comes down to a testament to the educational system, allowing those students to really get that foundation, get that foot in the workforce, and really chase their aspirations. To answer your question, my experience as a student, it's been priceless, and I honestly feel perhaps something that really needs to really be entered into the educational system now is a little bit of guidance. Where do we go? Because I know that for myself, when I finish, I'm like, bloody hell, mate, look, what now, right? So there's obviously that aspect of career advising and what's out there, but you can only achieve that through experience and through exposure. And Western Sydney University is great at that. They're located geographically very, very much well in the centre of everything. I've been able to, Danny from Deloitte is here, and I've been able to very much interact with him and understand the work he does with the Shaping Future Cities Committee, for example. And NAB, very soon I'll be going over to the UK with the dialogue with NAB, and these opportunities is what allows and sets the foundation for students to really see what's out there, and then from there they can shape their futures and see, this is what I want and this is what I don't want, and I think that's something that we need to continue.
Thank you. Apparently there's another question in the front. I'm told. Sorry?
Yeah, it's Claire.
Oh, hello.
Hello. Firstly, I want to acknowledge you, Linda, as one of my amazing colleagues in the Department of Education. I'm Claire Beattie from Schools Infrastructure New South Wales. Was a teacher for my sins for 13 years and now am helping to deliver infrastructure for our students of New South Wales. I know we've spoken a lot about moving away from deficit language, but what I'm actually hearing is a lot of words like broken, kids produced from the system, and disadvantaged. So I just want to call that out, if we can try and move away from that language in general as an audience. Secondly, we've talked a lot about the customer and listening to the customer. I see a lot of people who aren't kids in this room, so I just wonder if it's a chance to actually ask kids what they want. What do they want out of the infrastructure that we provide to them? And I know we're doing a lot of student voice and a lot of asking them what that looks like, whether it be the fact that 1 in 5 students have a disability and then hence need a wellbeing outcome for a mental health issue or so forth. I think we need to think more about student voice and how we go out, instead of thinking about what our solution is, because we'll get the answer we've always got. They know the answers and they can think. They're far less risk averse than us. They have far better imaginations than us. They're far deadlier smart than I'll ever be, I believe. So I think we need to really go back and say to the kids, who are the biggest influences of their parents, what do you want out of the infrastructure? What do you want out of your careers? And what does success look like for you? And then just listen, not try and steer this conversation.
Thanks, Claire. Comment, over to you.
The infrastructure is an interesting one. I'm actually not very interested in infrastructure. It's an inanimate object. It's an enabler. I'm much more interested in what good teachers do with enablers. And I'm not trying to be disingenuous there. We have a debate raging in this state at the moment across Australia about banning mobile phones. The phone is an inanimate object. Turn it off and does nothing. Give it to a competent, capable teacher. They'll do miracle things with it, and it's the same with the infrastructure. Your comment about the student voice is critical. That's exactly why I mentioned the point about 60, the attendance rates. We need to listen to their voices and take heed of what they're saying, because they actually do know what they're talking about, and we miss a wonderful opportunity unless we have that engagement. When you start talking about these things, you open things up for students to be able to design their own learning programs or contribute and development their own learning programs. And we've all seen examples of marvellous things that happened in schools when kids are trusted and given the opportunity to take that responsibility. But again, it comes back to a mindset. We welcome the expenditure that the state government's got into infrastructure. It's critical, but they would argue that we are now improving schooling. Well, if 40% of your clients are not there, it doesn't matter how good the building's going to be, there are actually more fundamental issues that need to be addressed.
Thank you very much, Greg, and thank you very much to the panel. We've run out of time, unfortunately. I hope that these voices pose questions for you to think about. And I see around the room parents, and parents need to take these ideas back to schools too. I'm with Greg too. Part of the challenge sometimes is to convince the parents that the change is so very important for their children's futures. Could we please thank the panel?